Samson, in every account, looked like the hero. Right? He was blessed by God. He was set apart by God in his birth and in his life. And he was strong, like super strong. He was always overcoming the most unbelievable odds. The Bible tells us that he single-handedly beat down 1,000 men with his bare hands. Well, his bare hands and a donkey's jawbone. But he was the hero, right? He was a man's man. He was like the Avengers before the Avengers were even a thing. But Samson's story doesn't really end like a hero. Towards the end of his life, he gets trapped by the Philistines and tricked into becoming without hair, loses his power, mocked on, spit on, and his eyes gouged out. In his weakness and in his defeat, this once completely heroic man has nothing left, and all he can do is cry out to God, Lord, give me my strength back. Give me my power. And in his weakness, God proved strong. Samson, he needed a shift. He needed a shift of how he saw himself and where he saw his power coming from. He needed his eyes gouged out, literal blindness to understand, to see who the real hero of the story was. I look around and I see all these amazing Christians and all these amazing churches really doing amazing things for the Church of Jesus. But if you're anything like me, you get tempted to see these people in churches as the hero. I mean, who doesn't want to be the hero, right? Using your strengths and the glory for the glory of God. But the truth is, like Samson, I think we all need a shift for us to understand that our strengths aren't going to be the one to change the world. It's God's strengths that'll change the world. So whether you grew up in church or not, everybody knows about the story of David and Goliath, right? Here are the Israelites ready for battle, and they're in the line of battle against the undefeatable foe, the Philistines. So here they are already feeling defeated, and to make matters worse, here the Philistines call down their champion, a 9-foot-tall giant named Goliath. And here he comes marching to the battle line with his unpenetrable armor and his javelin, which was at the front of it, weighs more than a bowling ball, mocking the Israelites, mocking the Lord. And here are the Israelites standing at the front line, frozen. They can't do anything. They're terrified, petrified with fear, defeated before the battle even began. And then David arrived. And David was far from impressive physically. You know, he was the runt. But he was dead set that God would get the glory in this battle. He didn't care what would happen. He was dead set that God would be victorious, even if he gave up his life doing it. And you know the rest. And David pulls out a stone and with a single slingshot beats Goliath. David, the runt, defeated Goliath. And you know, the story is told again and again and again in Sunday school and in regular church with the same morals, that we need to be more like David and fight against our Goliaths and fight our battles. But what if we are not David in this story? You know, what if we are not the heroes in this story? What if we're the Israelites on the front line watching? But us ourselves are completely incapable of defeating the Goliath of sin and death and fear. At least not until Jesus comes. The one who's maybe not so physically impressive, but is absolutely set to giving God the glory in the battles. And this is the shift that we need to have. And maybe we are on the front lines watching Jesus fight the battles because he is the hero. So Jesus is David in this story. You know, we are not the ones in the front lines doing the saving. In fact, we have just been heroically saved. And we are not the ones fighting and rescuing. In fact, we have just been rescued. Jesus is David in this story. And we are Israel. And you know what Israel did in the story? As soon as Goliath had been defeated, they picked up their swords, they picked up their weapons and chased after the Philistines. There was no more fear because their battle had already been won for them. So Samson really needed a shift in his perspective and how he viewed himself. And honestly, we do too. We are not the hero. We are not David. Jesus is the hero. But it doesn't mean we don't have a part in the battle. Stephen fell as the rocks rained down on him, one after another. Dragged outside the city gates of Jerusalem, being stoned for preaching the truth, the hard truth of Jesus, in the story of the very men stoning Stephen right now. Stephen was defeated in just moments from his death. And unlike Samson and David, Stephen isn't looking much like a hero. But in this moment, Stephen is always remembered as the first Christian martyr. In the hour of his defeat, Stephen too has a shift in perspective. The Bible tells us that as he's dying, as rocks are being thrown upon him, he looks up and sees heaven open up and Jesus standing before him. Rather than the blood and the death from his battered body, Stephen was focusing on the river of life from the throne of God. Stephen's perspective shifted. And with the little bit he had left in him, with his last breath, Stephen prayed for the very men who were killing him. At this moment, Stephen doesn't look like a hero, but he prayed like one. And you know what happens next? Stephen dies, but the story that he died for doesn't. Standing next to the man who just killed Stephen was a man named Saul. And he too began to have a shift in perspective. And it wasn't immediate. But as he heard the prayers of Stephen, as the prayers of Stephen fell on his ears, change started to happen. And in the future, he too sees Jesus and his life completely shifts. His perspective shifted, and so did his name. Saul became Paul, and he soon took the gospel through Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the world. Stephen didn't look like Samson or defeat giants like David did, but he was undoubtedly a hero. And the world couldn't see it, but can you? It takes a shift in perspective, but can you see it? What if a campus full of students shifted our perspective to understanding that our strengths aren't the most important tool in the kingdom of God, but it's in our weaknesses that God is strong? What if we as the church shifted our perspective to not seeing ourselves as David, but Jesus as David, who heroically saves and has already saved us, and us as the church picking up our weapons and going towards the fight that Jesus has already won? What if each of us as individuals shifted our perspective, and instead of seeing the dust in the dirt in the material world around us, could see the kingdom of God and experiencing around us and understanding that our prayers can change the world? And what if we shifted our perspective to the power of the cross? Can you imagine?